All right. Good evening and welcome. Thank you for being with us tonight. My name is Adam Block. I'm the chair of the Needham Planning Board.
And I'm Reg Foster. I'm chair of the Needham Housing Authority.
And we find a quorum of our respective boards present. And so we call this meeting the special joint meeting of the Housing Authority and the Planning Board to order. This meeting of the Planning Board and the Housing Authority is being conducted in a hybrid manner consistent with state regulations, and it's also being recorded. All materials for the meeting tonight are available on the town's website, which is needhamma.gov. We're here tonight because the Needham Housing Authority is looking to redevelop the Linden Chambers site that requires a zoning bylaw amendment. Town meeting approval of the zoning bylaw change in May next year would enable the Housing Authority to apply for funding in October of next year. And that, if approved, would enable construction in 2025. So almost 18 months away. The plan for tonight is for Reg to provide an overview of the existing conditions at Linden Chambers. Then I'll present the proposed new zoning framework. And then Dan Chen with BH&A, who's an architect that the Housing Authority engaged, will present the project plan that implements the zoning framework that we talk about tonight. The initial presentation will take about 25 minutes, and then we'll take public comment for about 90 minutes, and then probably look to adjourn around 9:30 or so. So that's the framework for tonight. And I'd like to now turn it over to Reg.
Thank you, Adam. As I said, my name is Reg Foster, chair currently at the Needham Housing Authority. I've been on the board since 2009. I will also plug our website. We have a project website, which is lindenchambers-needham.com. Hopefully that's easy to remember. And your input and comments are incredibly valuable and important to making this vital project a success. So in the next few minutes, I'll be setting the stage for this community engagement meeting from the Housing Authority's point of view, and outline our mission and describe the existing conditions in about 5 minutes or so. So the Needham Housing Authority was formed in 1948 from town meeting, and from the 50s through the 80s, we added about 360 units of deeply affordable housing via 4 projects on 43 acres of land here in Needham. Split about 50-50 between family and elderly units. We also administer 123 Section 8 vouchers, which also enable a holder to get affordable housing. It is a fact that the Needham Housing Authority provides nearly 50% of the actual affordable housing here in Needham. So for over 7 decades, the Housing Authority's mission has been twofold: to be an excellent landlord and keep those trains running on time, and developing and preserving deeply affordable housing units here in Needham. But now that we're in the 2020s, the Housing Authority finds that we're falling short of accomplishing our missions. Most of our 115 plus or minus physical structures are worn out, and all but 20 buildings are badly in need of major investment in modernization or complete redevelopment. As the recently completed Needham Housing Plan documents, and it was approved by the Planning Board and the Select Board this January, there's a huge shortage of deeply affordable homes in Needham. These statistics are backed up by NHA's long waiting list. It takes an average of applicant years to work your way up to the top of the waiting list. So could we have the existing conditions slide? And that's what brings us here tonight. That slide, yes. After several years of study, In 2021, NHA launched the Preservation and Redevelopment Initiative, called PRI for short. The PRI defined a half a dozen projects that could be accomplished and funded over a 10+ year period. And one of them is the redevelopment of NHA's Linden Street and Chambers Street properties, which you see here on the screen. And I've been told I can't not talk into a microphone, but I do have a pointer here. Look at that. So let me see if I can get the tech to work here for me here. So this is a strange, elongated, difficult site with this whole area up here is unbuildable. So only really about half the site is buildable. And I think almost everybody in this room probably knows where High Rock School is, because you've had a kid in the school for at least a year. And so you've seen this, you've driven by it dozens and dozens and dozens of times going to the school and back. It consists of 18 buildings over on this side. This is the north side on the right here. Each has 4 units, 72 units altogether. That was the original 2 projects that were built here, sub-projects. And then it has another 80 units right over here in 5 2-story buildings. Basically, the challenge is, being approximately 60 years old, these 152 units are worn out and in need of complete replacement. The studios are cramped and inadequate by modern standards, being approximately 420 square feet in size each. There are other major problems and minor problems, but the biggest is energy efficiency. We do not have any. And compliance with the ADA accessibility standards. The laundries are on the 2nd floor of the 2-story building, so go figure, if you have an elderly and disabled population. Also, the Linden and Chambers redevelopment has been a top town priority, not only in the current housing plan that was just released at the beginning of the year, approved at the beginning of the year, but also way back in the 2004 housing plan and the 2007 housing plan. So the NHA is proposing to the town that we redevelop the Linden Chambers site, starting construction as soon as within the next 2 years. So this is not, off 5 years in the future. This is why we're holding this meeting. We have the following ambitious objectives. One is to replace, of course, the 152 existing units with 152 larger 1-bedroom units, and Dan will go into more details in a minute on that. Create as much as 100 new units of affordable, deeply affordable housing to sort of address the huge backlog of need. We are increasing the building setbacks as much as possible from what exists today. As you can see, there's a whole row of buildings right along Linden Street, and that was a design objective. Thus, and creating by compacting more green space for recreational use, spring to fall. Whoops, we have a microphone creep here. So another critical objective for us is to achieve attractive landscaping and building design that fits into the neighborhood, while simultaneously reducing the encroachment into existing wetlands that surrounds the site on all 3 sides. So there's wetlands here, there's wetlands there, and there's wetlands here. And Dan will talk about that a little bit too. We want to fix tenant accessibility problems with elevators and designs that accommodate wheelchairs and handicapped people and older people that need more space, while still preserving the amenities that we have now and improving them if we can, thus facilitating the prime objective of affordable housing for seniors for any income level, which is to have aging in place as much as possible. And finally, and last, far from least, ensuring the fundability from state and federal funding sources. So after working intensely with our BH&A architecture team for the last 11 months, NHA has come up with a building design solution that achieves all these goals in a balanced way, but it does not comply with the current underlying zoning in the High Rock neighborhood, which is single residence B and general residence. So what is that solution? Before I turn it over to Dan, I want to turn it back over to Adam here, who's going to describe the zoning that is placed today and what we're asking for, hopefully from town meeting this spring. Over to you, Adam.
Thanks, Rich. I want to make sure this works.
Would you like my pointer?
I would, I'd like a swivel stick for my neck.
Yeah,
but-
you have to sort of get sideways on your mic here.
Exactly.
Here, use my
Sorry.
mic here.
All right. I don't know if everyone can hear me okay? So the planning board is considering, and I'll go through this in a second. The planning board is considering this zoning bylaw amendment provided to us by council for the housing authority. And the framework for the new affordable housing district would enable multifamily housing by right. So a quick overview of zoning. Zoning really consists of two quintessential elements. The first are the uses. And typically uses are divided into two categories. There are uses that are allowed by right, and there are uses that are allowed by special permit. The big difference is the regulatory burden for a by right. You can't deny a by right project if the use is allowed by right, as opposed to the use or project being allowed by special permit, where you have much greater discretionary ability on the planning board representing the town to just deny a project. So we want to make clear that that we're looking to enable this use by right with a site plan review process, which means that the planning board would still be able to impose all of the conditions that a municipality typically does impose to mitigate any adverse impacts as a result of the development. We're told that that financing sources for public housing development require stability in the permitting process. And so by right development is a much more stable permitting process than a special permitting process, which is seen as unstable and therefore could jeopardize project financing. So that's the uses that we see. And then we have the dimensional regulations. And the core dimensional regulations we'll review here. So we'll start with frontage. And under the current zoning, the frontage along Linden Street is 80 feet, but we're proposing to increase that to 150 feet. And then we have multiple setbacks on the front, the side, and the rear. So while now the front setback is 20 feet, we're looking to increase the front yard setback to 40 feet. And then while the side yard setback today is allowed to be 14 feet, we're looking to increase that to 25 feet. Where there's a rear setback of 20 feet, the zoning would propose, again, 25 feet in the rear. Then we have height, and height is composed of a number of different individual elements. So we have height for a sloped roof. So the height under the current zoning framework allows for 35 feet in the district, which is the SRB district and a general residence district. Here we would be creating a new district, the affordable housing district. and the height for a sloped roof would be at 58 feet, and the allowable height for a flat roof would be 43 feet. And then there's a height for the mechanical structures on top of the roof, where there's no restriction and no regulation in the current zoning framework. We're limiting it to 15 feet, which is not uncommon for larger scale buildings in other districts. And then also a mechanical coverage of 33%, which is to say that the mechanical structures on a roof cannot occupy more than 33% of the roof. So it's not going to be as imposing if you see 10 feet of mechanical equipment. We also are examining the number of stories. Under the single residence district, SRB, the maximum stories and the general residence is 2.5 stories. And we're looking at increasing that in order to promote as much deeply affordable housing in the town as possible to 4 stories. Another dimensional regulation is the floor area ratio, which relates to the size of the building that you can build. So in the single family residence district, the floor area ratio is between 0.36 and 0.38. So for instance, on a 10,000 square foot lot, which is not uncommon in the SRB district, you could build a house that has about 36 to 3,800 square feet of a house on what would be the first and second floor. Here we're looking to raise the floor area ratio to 0.5. The other note on the size of the building or the mass of the development is that the site has specific constraints like wetlands, elevation, high water table, which constrains where a building could be sited and how the building would be sited, which would therefore limit the size of the thing. And then there's no regulation for the number of units per acre. That's not how the single family residential district is regulated. And so under the existing condition, the allowable number of units per acre is 13.8. The zoning is looking to increase that to about 25 units per acre, which is clearly a significant increase than what the current condition is. The project that's being proposed is a little less than that at roughly 22 units per acre. And then finally, lot coverage. How much mass can you have on the lot? So under the current scenario, you can cover with a structure impervious space 25 to 35% of your lot. But under the proposed zoning, you would reduce the lot coverage. You can only cover up to 20% of the lot. It's true, this is a large lot. Is it 4 acres or 11 acres? 11 acres. It's roughly 11 acres. So 20% of 11 acres is different, and yet we know that there are limitations and constraints under the natural condition of the site. Lastly, we don't regard this as a dimensional regulation, yet it is something for discussion, are the number of dwelling units you can have here. There's obviously no regulation for that right now, and yet we know that we have 152 units, and the Needham Housing Authority is proposing to increase that by about 60% to 247 units. So this is the framework for the zoning, and then the question is, how do you implement that zoning? And so before I just turn this over to Dan, the architect for the Needham Housing Authority, I just want to remind everyone that we have this spreadsheet on as part of the presentation. It's available on the planning board site. It's also available on the Needham Housing Authority's site, and we'll continue to have discussions on this. So Dan, I'll turn it over to you.
And this will be handy here.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me? Great. My name is Dan Chen. I'm an architect. I'm also the principal in charge of this project with BH+A, Barkman, Hendry and Archetype. We've been brought on board since the beginning of this year. So we've been working on this project continuously for about 11 months. And at this point, we have a general design that fits within the framework of the zoning that you just heard, and I will walk you through what the current planning and the design looks like, or also the layout. This is what we refer to as a site plan. Just to orient you, the Linden Street is along the top, and to the right of this off the screen, you have Great Plain Avenue. To the left, you have Yorick Road and High Rock Street. Immediately also off this screen somewhat is the High Rock Middle School. And so this gray area that you see is the playing field. So what we're proposing as a density or as a units for this project is 247 units. That's divided into two buildings. One that you see on the right here. The other is the one that you see on the left here. And these buildings are divided into three phases. And the phasing is part of the least disruption to the residents in terms of number of relocation, or not relocations, but minimizing the units being demolished in a phasing way. The other is that this is the most compact footprint of the buildings. Therefore, it helps with minimizing the cost. We have also 130 parking spaces proposed for this project. Roughly half located, 70 located in phase 1A, 1B here, and 60 in phase 2. There's a total of 136 units in phase 1A and 1B. These are I
used to work for community television here, so we'll get you both ways there.
Thank you. And so what is so for these buildings, one thing I want to emphasize on this plan is the setbacks and these requirements. With this current design, we have 88 feet. That's setback from the furthest point of this building in phase 1A from the property line from Linden Street. And the setback varies from 133 feet in the farthest point and to the 87 feet. And from the back setback against this property line, here's Maple Street, is starting with the height, the biggest setback at 91 feet, and to the smallest setback of 33 feet on this site. And as you can see, that the site plan or the site property is not a very regular site. And so it sort of expands and then it contracts as it goes towards Linden Street.
Beyond those
setbacks? Yeah, so these dotted lines here that you see, they're very faint, and hopefully you'll see better on your own screen, is that these are the existing footprint of the 18 Linden Street or Linden buildings here. And here you'll see the 5 outline footprint of the existing Chambers Street building. And so again, the reason these buildings were configured this way, there's a lot of thought that has gone into it, particularly in terms of phasing and how to sort of minimize the impact to the surrounding area. One of which is, I would also like to mention the side yard setbacks of here is 158 feet where the property line is off the screen. And then we have this other building, phase 2, where we have 118 feet, sort of considered the front yard, because it's really Linden Street here, and then 32 feet to the side yard setback. And so these are some of the metrics that has helped to, that are within that framework of the zoning chart that you just saw in the previous slide. The other elements that you see here are fire lanes that are requirements as part of the life safety requirement for this building. This portion of middle that you see, and I'll talk a little bit more in detail and you'll see the plans, are the core, what we call the core of the building. What does that mean? Is it includes the elevators, the stairs, as well as the amenity spaces being proposed for this, for elderly development. And in our experience, our firm does specialize in elderly development and elderly housing, in that these community component, which they do have one currently, are really important part of the elderly housing. We have proposed, in addition to these setbacks, there are these green spaces that you see that are being programmed with recreation, outdoor space, seating area, as well as walking trails if we can, and also community garden, which is also a really large component of the current residents here. There is a drop off as you come in, and then there are the front parkings, and then this is the other entry for the phase 2 parking area here. So this, we've also looked at another side option here, where we split the parking. The biggest difference between this and the previous design is that this parking lot is split to push to the back. And so phase 1B building now is pushed towards Linden Street. In this scheme, however, your front yard setback is at 40 feet versus the 80 feet. So essentially the building has been pushed forward. But in doing so, it does allow you to have some additional setback or distance between phase 1B and Maple Street at 158 feet here. So that's sort of the main differentiation between these two site plans. Phase 2 remains the same. Next slide, please. What I want to touch here on quickly is you can see that middle portion on the ground floor was a community space. This is the lobby area, all the amenities, building infrastructure, electrical rooms, mechanicals, and so on, as well as the room configurations. These projects of 136 units in phase 1A, 1B are primarily one bedrooms of size 575 square feet. This is in comparison to the current 420 square feet studio units. And we also have 4 2-bedroom units as part of this development in phase 1A, and 4 2-bedroom units as part of phase 1B. Next. The elevation here really is to give you a sense to talk about the height. So as discussed, we do have 4 stories here. At the height of the ridge of the roof is at 53 feet. And this is part of, again, the zoning framework that is being proposed. Each of the floors are 10 feet in between floor to floor. That gives you an 8-foot finished ceiling in the completed units. Next. This is you can think of this as a slice through the building, and that gives you a sense of the relationship between the levels of the building and the roof and the areas where we are planning on proposing the mechanical systems for this building. And on the right, it's a comparison to the High Rock Middle School that are just to give you a sense of the height of the 53 feet to the 48 feet at the High Rock to the highest point. Next. The next 5 slides is going to give you a sort of an artist's rendering of the proposal. Again, to orient you, Linden Street here, Maple Street back here. This is High Rock Middle School in the foreground. This is that playing the play field, and then Great Plain Avenue here. This is Blake Street, and then this is the High Rock Middle Road. Sylvan Street is right here, and then with Uric and High Rock Street beyond. So you can see that the parking in this option is in the front with the drop-off, building phase 1A, phase 1B. That's the center where the elevator and the stairs are, and then phase 2 in the background. Next. Here's another view looking from looking from Maple Street, looking at phase 1A, phase 1B, phase 2, again, High Rock Middle School and the playing field. Next. This is a perspective looking from standing at the corner of Linden Street and Blake, and then looking south to your left. So you can sort of see in the background, parking, surface parking here, phase 1A and phase 1B is tilted away from the design. Next. Here's at the opposite corner, where now you're standing at the corner of Sylvan Road, baseball field is here, and looking north and to the right, that's phase 1B. Here's, you can see the parking in front, and then again, the phase 1A is bent away towards the back, and that's the parking in front. Next. And here is another view standing at the entry to the High Rock Middle School. Here you're seeing phase 1A, phase 1B, and this middle portion here is where the elevator, community center, entry lobby are here. And then this is Linden Street in front of you. Next. So with that, I'd like to hand this back to Chairman Block to give you the schedule of the project.
Thank you, Dan. That's very helpful. So now I'll take just a minute to give you a sense of context of where we are in time. This meeting tonight will inform the zoning bylaw that we ultimately present to town meeting. The planning board intends to, which is why your participation tonight, and for those that are home that can participate tonight as well, remotely or by emailing us, which we'll provide the email address shortly, to help inform that the final zoning product. The planning board would intend to vote its draft of the bylaw in mid-January, so about a month from now. And then we'll hold a public hearing in February for additional public comment. And then we would consider any final changes to the bylaw amendment. And then we would vote the final language to the bylaw amendment in March, which we would then present to town meeting for a vote in May. So there are some, additional timeframes. The timeline continues through a site plan approval process. If the zoning is approved by town meeting, immediately thereafter, the housing authority will apply to the planning board for a site plan review, and then they would thereafter apply for their financing and ultimately seek to build in 2025, about 18 months from now. So with that, we're going to move into a public comment period. And we'd like to remind everyone of our ground rules, which are designed to provide for an accurate record on the one hand, because we're going to review this and consider everyone's thought and feedback that we received tonight, and also to have a respectful conversation. So the first thing is we'd like you to please start with your name and your address. That's helpful for us. And if you could please address your remarks to the chair, and then I can redirect the comment or question as necessary. We will ask you to please keep your comments to 3 minutes, so that way we can hear from as many people as possible. And then We will allow speakers to speak again, provided we've had an opportunity to hear from everyone else that's wanted to speak. We are looking for new comments. So if you've heard someone, if you agree with what a previous speaker said, it's just as effective to say, I agree with a previous speaker. Again, we're just trying to get through to hear from as many people as possible. And we will cycle through comments in the room and also on Zoom. And some of your questions that you raised tonight, we may not necessarily be able to answer in the moment, but we will do our best, and we'll ask staff to note those questions so we can go back, collect information, and be able to answer the questions subsequently. And if you are not able to speak tonight for whatever reason, if you know other people that are not present that would like to comment, we encourage you to continue in the process and to email your comments to planning@needhamma.gov. That's planning@needhamma.gov. I'll just note quickly for the record that we received the following pieces of correspondence already on this. We received by email dated November 22nd from Ross Donald regarding the format of the public comment period tonight. And secondly, we received by email dated December 2nd from Scott Schwartz asking about the number of units in the project. Hopefully we're able to answer that tonight. So with that, let's jump into the public comment period.
And
And
use the microphone.
thanks, Reg. We have a microphone here. The first hand, I saw your hand, but Bruce just got his hand up just a second faster. I see you too, Ross, and then I'm sure we may have some people online. So we're going to rotate in the room. So Bruce, if you'd like to stand up, please, and share your comments.
And using my former cable TV shops here, I noticed the microphone is a mobile mic, so it is possible to hand it to somebody who can't get up and stand.
Bruce, you can take it out of the holder. Take the mic out of the holder if you want. Just
It
slide
slides
low. Just
towards
slide
you.
low.
Yep.
Okay,
And then you can hand it off to the next person that Adam recognizes.
so I'm
here.
Bruce Eisenhunt. I live on Marktree Road, former planning board member. I think this is fantastic and thank you very much. Support. I just had a question. There were two proposals in terms of design that the architect, I'll call it Plan A and B. As I understand it, Plan B, the parking would basically be put toward the back, away from Linden Street. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear on this. The zoning proposal that's being made would accommodate both plans. That's my first question, to make sure that's the case. And secondly, if that's correct, then the ultimate decision on Plan A and Plan B in terms of design can actually wait a little bit, probably until site plan review. Do I have that right? Thank you.
Yeah, so to answer your question, yes, on the former, and on the yes, on the second question, as to the first question, I wouldn't say it would accommodate both. It would accommodate either. So, because exactly. So just with that clarification, then
Just one more technical note, Dan, if it's whose screen is being shared up there, because while you're doing that, the Needham channel PT audience can't see who's talking. So we can put slides back and up, but you
I
got to go up and down here, whoever.
No,
She's
she's
switching
managing
back and
different
forth.
feeds.
All right,
yeah.
good. Thank you.
okay. Alex, is there someone at home that wants to speak, and then I will come to you?
Yes.
Thank
Rachel Krimlist, I will bring her over.
Rachel, we're bringing you over, and then again, if you could start with your name and address, that would be helpful. Thank you.
She's not coming over. Do you want me to do the next person in line? Ooh.
She declined. Okay. So then I'm going to actually recognize the lady in the second row in the pink. If you'd like to state your name and address, please. Thank you.
My name is Nancy Potts. I live at 135 Linden Street in the house that my father built in 1956, which is located across from housing. I'm extremely concerned about the 4.5-story redevelopment project. A 4.5-story building, 53 feet high, would ruin the appearance of the neighborhood. It would be like living across from a project. The 4.5-story building would tower over my 1-story home. There is a proposed significant increase in units in phase 1A and 1B, which would lead to more problems such as flooding. I live on the low spot of Linden Street, and when it rains heavy, not only the street floods, but my yard does too. The water runs down from both ends of Linden Street, the High Rock School driveway, and Blake Street. I take pride in my property and work very hard to make it look nice. It's so frustrating to see my plants and mulch wash away. I have some pictures of the flooding problems.
Thank you very much. Just for the record, because people at home can't see that, Nancy is providing us with copies of pictures that she's taken of flooding. Is this from in August of this year?
No, I have those on my cell phone. Those are
Right.
from, but I have those photos from
Okay.
now.
Thank you.
The last rainstorm, the water surrounded my foundation. The house was built on a slab. The waves almost came in my entranceway. I was a nervous wreck. The problem is when the town put the overflow in our backyard and filled in the brook on the side of the house, they used too small of a pipe and it can't take all the water that comes from the street, and it runs between the two houses like a flowing river. My concern is when they remove the trees, knock down the buildings, and disturb the soil, that this will create more issues with the drainage problem and will only add to the burden. Another concern is the traffic. Linden Street already has cars that speed down the street, and many use it as a pass-through street. The location of the High Rock School causes many problems. I have constant issues with the parents blocking my driveway. I can't get in and out of it. My family, visitors, and hospice have experienced many difficulties. We also will have more emergency vehicles, delivery trucks, etc. By increasing the number of units, Linden Street traffic will become even more hazardous to the young children that make Linden Street their home. I'm very concerned about the density and the size of the building, and given the lot size and its limitations, we need the trees. Housing needs to put a quantitative measure of tree coverage all along the front of the property. It's surrounded by ledge and wetlands. The 4.5-story building will be built on land that has a very high water table, and the clay will not allow proper drainage. Please do not change the zoning law to allow a 4.5-story building to be built in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Before we go to other people in the room, there was someone else. Janice. Janice, we ask if you could please state your name and address for the record. That would be helpful. Janice, if you're able to unmute yourself and to turn your camera on, that would be helpful. Try that one more time, Janice, if you're able to unmute yourself and turn your camera on, then we will be happy to hear from you. You know, if she's able to move over.
She's a panelist. She just has to. I can't do that.
No, that's right. Okay, so Janice, we see that you are able to speak, but we need you to unmute yourself. While you're looking to do that, we will go with some other people in the room. There was I think a gentleman here that you had your hand up, sir, on the second row. Is that right? Did you wish to speak? Okay. If you could state your name and address for the record, please.
Hey, my name is Tony Sisto from Meeting House Circle in Needham. A four-story building, what would be the right water pressure to maintain a building like that? Do the water mains that you have now have the capacity to handle that? And like this woman said, what about the drainage? You'd have dishwashers and bathtubs and showers. Where's all that wastewater going to go?
So it's,
You know,
it's,
And the electric grid. I mean, the power goes out in this town quite often. You know, these things, you're gonna have to find these things out before you do this.
thank you. Janice, are you able to unmute yourself? And I understand that you're on camera now. We cannot hear you. Janice,
you
are
hear
you able to unmute? Oh.
There we go.
Did you hear
go
me?
again. Now we can, Janice. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm on the board, but I have technical difficulties with Apple. So this is the only way I can listen in. So I just want the rest of the board to know I am here listening. Okay.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Janice. I saw you in the attendee list, so I knew you were here at the beginning of the meeting here. So thanks for letting us know.
Thank you,
Sorry
Janice.
about that.
No problem. Thank you, Janice. The woman here, Laura. All right. If you'd like to come, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I had, someone sent me a message that
I can.
Yeah, you can speak.
Good evening.
You can't hear them. So explain that the Needham channel is muted.
I can't hear you. No, it is gone.
Alex, your computer's unmuted. My computer is muted, it's supposed to be because the feed is going through.
It's on Needham channel.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Kalpana, can you hear us now?
Yes, sir.
Thank you
you.
very much. Very good. It's good to be operational. Thank you very much. Sorry for the technical difficulties. We appreciate your patience. Please go ahead, Kalpana. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
No comments. I just wanted to let you know that we could not hear people who are on Zoom, but now we are back. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do you have any comments or questions about the zoning proposal?
No, thank you for
Okay.
asking.
Very good. Thank you very kindly. So next we'll come back to the room. If you'd like to say, come to the microphone and whatever is easier for you.
Thank you for having this tonight. My name is Helen Garagosian. I live on Chambers Street. I was the last president of the local tenant organization at Linden Chambers. And that was back, we ended in end of June 2019. I've been keeping my ear to the ground and attending some commission meetings along the way. And I'm very grateful for all the hard work that Reg and the commissioners that we have done. One of the things that concerned me, and I had some input from my neighbors, is that the distance walking from their vehicles to the building. I can't tell, it's probably not that far. When you look at a schematic like that, it might not be that far a walk, but that was one of the concerns because there's two different variations of the parking lot and the distance to the building. There was only one main entrance, as far as I know. Would there be, let's say, optional doors every so often in the front of the building, for example, maybe because of the fire codes that have to have that? And also, I don't want to just sit here and ask for things. I want to just tell you that I appreciate the roof over my head. Not enough people from public housing maybe come and tell you that this is very much needed. There is a housing crisis everywhere. I've lived in Florida, I've lived in Hawaii, and you know what's going on in Maui. I lived in Lahaina, and they're going through this. And affordable housing is a crisis. And there's now baby boomers aging, and they're needing places for their kids and their aging parents and so on and so forth. So I see Reg's schematic having another building off to the side. And I was saying earlier that it would be nice to have public housing on one area with the 4 stories, and maybe the grandparents and the kids would have affordable rent somehow with mixed use in the other buildings down in Chambers area. That makes total sense. It's a win-win for both sides. As I recently attended a housing coalition meeting, and I absolutely see the importance, because now, as like myself, I'm 71 in another week or so. Baby boomers are aging, and et cetera, et cetera. You guys all know. And CBS, by the way, on 60 Minutes, if you have a way to go back and look at it, did a segment on affordable housing and what a crisis. And as far as zoning goes, the word crisis to me says emergency. So if we're in an emergency, I don't want to hear negative things like I heard one guy say at the coalition meeting, oh, zoning, that could take decades, a decade. Then he said, as a matter of fact, decades, and he made it plural. And in my mind, if there's a crisis that says emergency, and the governor, as they did in Hawaii, and the senator could make it a priority, emergency priority for zoning to be expedited. So it's not going to take decades to zone. That's my comment. And I'm very, very happy to see everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Alex, do we have anyone online? Chow? All right. And then we'll come back to this side of the room. What's that? I know. A number of people have. And we will get to everybody. We will get to everybody. Is Chow able to?
Hello?
Hello, if you could state your name and address for the record, please, that would be helpful.
Yeah, hi, this is Jeremy Chow, 96 Maple Street. Town meeting member, precinct D. Two comments I want to make. One is the Maple Street residents might be concerned about drainage issues in the design. So hopefully the architect will clarify the design in regard to drainage of the wetland areas between Maple Street and the Linden Street project. The second comment I want to make is wondering if there's going to be an access path to the rail trail, which is right at that Needham junction. I'm wondering if there's common land in the plans to develop a pathway to that. So those are two comments that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Chow. I had an opportunity to speak with our planning director and with our town engineer and our director of public works, and I'll pass this to Dan in a moment about drainage, which I understand, given the, not just the, the 1 in 100 year storm or whatever it was in August, which was an exception to the case. I understand that there's still flooding on a fairly regular basis in the area. Right now, this site was developed and there's a lot of impervious space, which means that the rain hits the roofs, the rain hits the driveways, and it just drains onto the grass, drains on really onto the street. And this site was developed prior to the stormwater bylaw that the town subsequently enacted. Like all municipalities enacted their own stormwater management bylaw. And there are a couple of notes on any new development. Any new development would be required to meet the stormwater bylaw regulations, which would have the effect of reducing the impact on the stormwater management system in the town. It's also worth noting that the proposed development actually reduces the amount of impervious surface. It increases the amount of pervious surface. So in and of itself, without the stormwater management bylaw, as developed, as proposed, it would reduce the impact on the stormwater management system. The town is also embarking upon a process of examining some of the bottlenecks in this particular site, and are also looking at, I understand that the town has met with a number of residents in the area to talk and address these concerns. And it's an ongoing process. And there may be an update in the stormwater management bylaw as part of that process. So the other point to make that before I just pass it on to you, Dan, is that as a project, that the town will go through its approval process, and part of that approval process will require that, like any other project, when you develop something, it's illegal to impact adversely your neighbor's property. And so with that, and then we also have the opportunity, I apologize for losing my thought for a moment, to impose conditions that will mitigate these types of impacts, on the neighborhood if the zoning is passed. With that, Dan, I'd like to pass that to you.
To put some numbers to those statements, the current roof area, including this at the existing Linden Chambers building, and when I say impervious surface, is referred to all the roof areas, all the hard surface parking areas, all the path, and so anything essentially not grass. And it's roughly around 133,000 square feet on the 480,000 square feet site. And the current proposed in both the design, site A, site plan A, site plan B, we're looking at around 124 to 126,000 square feet in terms of those same metrics. And so you have about 6,000 to 8,000 square feet of reduction in terms of impervious surface area.
Thank you, Dan. Was there someone else? We just hear from, we just heard from Chow online, the gentleman in orange, and then Ross, after we hear from someone online, we'll come to you. Gentleman in orange, sir. Thank you very much.
Good evening, and thank you for having us here tonight so we can express our views.
Thank you.
I have three major concerns.
If you could state
Oh,
your
I'm
name and
sorry.
address.
My
please.
name is Jim Burke. I live at 188C Linden Street and have been there since 2007. It's a great place. And sometimes they say, why are we disturbing it? But being concerned with the new building, my first question is, why is there a catch basin? How many gallons does the catch basin hold? And where does the catch basin water go? We all know that the buildings are built on sand. My concern is the weight of the building and whether or not the land can support the building. I then ask whether or not there is an alternative site here in Needham. Why does it have to be at Linden and Chambers? Can the building at Linden and Chambers be restored? And what are you gonna do with all the bricks when they're knocked down? But getting to the basic question, how many trees are gonna be knocked down? How is that gonna affect the environment? And how is it going to affect the water flow? I'd appreciate answers to those questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. A lot of those questions are technical questions. We want to try and focus on the zoning. At a global level, I would say that as part of the development, surveys will be done, engineering surveys will be done, which would reveal what's necessary to stabilize a building. It will also include a stormwater management report that any other developer is required to provide as part of a permitting process. And the concept at this time is really, I think, to modernize the facilities. And that's the proposal that's coming in front of planning board that we're looking at with their zoning that they're proposing for the town. So we're going to focus on those elements, and the elements that you're talking about, in particular about the environmental impact, the landscaping and so forth. All of that will be addressed because it's required to be addressed at a subsequent process if and only if the zoning is approved. The zoning's not approved, there's no project. So yeah, you had a follow-up.
Isn't this a major concern on the environmental impact before you get the change in the zoning?
So for the record, he's had a follow-up question about, will the environmental impact adversely affect the zoning? Right now, I appreciate the comment. I appreciate the comment, and the board will review that and we'll talk about that as we deliberate on the process. Thank you very much, Jim. Was there someone else? Joe? Joe, if you're able to come over, unmute yourself and state your name and address for the record, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Adam. My name is Joe Leghorn. I live at 40 Linden Street. I'm a town meeting member, precinct D. One of the important things to me is always thinking about the common good and also realizing that nothing is perfect and the perfect is the enemy of the good. I visited constituents at Linden Chambers in both the high rise and the low rise buildings, and these need to be replaced. I also worked with our former building commissioner, Dan Roach, to come up with what is the existing stormwater management plan, because this is an important thing all over town. And we now have a committee that is being formed to address additional issues with that. But I think when we look at things, we can't let the perfect get in the way of the good. Linden Chambers needs to be replaced. We need to provide habitable, modern spaces for the folks that live with us who, will have the ability to get upstairs with an elevator. As you get older, and as I am getting older, walking up 3 stories would be a real problem for me. The heights of the building, their setback. I think that a lot of careful thought has gone into this. As a member of the board of the Needham Community Farms, I attended a lot of the Community Preservation Committee meetings where Reg presented, because I was there advocating on behalf of the community beds. And I thought a lot of careful thought and planning has gone into what the Needham Housing Authority is presenting. I think what the planning board has come up with is a reasonable solution. I think that individual problems can be addressed. I think stormwater is a critical issue, but the current bylaw should address most of those issues. With regard to traffic, those of you who live on Linden Street beyond Oak Street do not have to deal with the drive-through 18-wheelers rumbling by your house, but got to go to the traffic committee for that. So, the whole issue is we have to all look as to how we can achieve what is best for everybody, not what is best for individuals. It's all about the common good. And I'm sure there'll be little tweaks with regard to the zoning, but basically I think we need to do this to respect the residents that currently live in these places and to improve the lives of those who will live there after them. Thank you very much, Adam, for recognizing me.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Reg.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I was looking at Ross and I said Reg.
We are both flattered by your doing that, right, Ross?
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Ross Donald. I live at 25H Chambers Street, been there 13 years, born and raised in the town. And before I forget, I believe there's a hydrology study scheduled. I don't know who's going to do it, maybe DPW or something, 2025. So I don't know whether you're going to wait and incorporate that information into the plans going forward. By the way, just in passing, I don't know for sure, but I tend to think that there were no notices provided to the residents in Chinese or Russian. So we have no Asian or Russian. Actually, I asked if they spoke Russian. She said Ukrainian. So I thought that was interesting. But they're not here, haven't been notified, I think. At any rate, I want to actually start off by expressing some gratitude to have a roof over my head at public housing, community housing, I'd like to call it. Especially today, the executive director, Cheryl Gosman, was able to obtain a new router. Lori, Blair, and Will installed the system, a new Wi-Fi system in the community room. And we'd hope to have that expand. We're doing Zoom meetings because not everybody has internet access. So we do a Zoom connection in the community room and people show up there. At least that's the idea. And we'd hope to make this part of the upgrading of the community space that's going on now. People still live there. I do want to make a comment about the maintenance, which is lacking. And I think the best thing I can say is maybe a quote by Kurt Vonnegut, who said that another flaw in human nature is that everybody wants to build, but nobody wants to do the maintenance. I think I've reached an understanding of what the Needham Housing Authority is. When people say, they're often asked, politicians or commentators, and usually whatever the question is, the first comment is, you know, of course, that the town of Needham is separate from the Needham Housing Authority. They really have nothing to do with each other. Well, despite the intersections and so forth, I've decided that rather than fighting that, saying, of course, you know, we're part of the town, we're all in this together. Actually, the Needham Housing Authority is not a public body and is not operating within government. So that helped me to, what that means that it's separate. Except when Needham has a problem with housing, and then they want to find land that's owned by the housing authority. So we're suddenly not separate anymore. So, and Needham Housing Authority has done that right from the beginning, providing veterans housing, providing housing for the elderly, which was the cluster housing that we're talking about here on Linden Street, which I think is an excellent design. We should go into that. It is actually well insulated. There's 8 inches of foam. People often say, well, no maintenance has been done, no work has been done on these buildings in 50 years. Well, I think it was about 4 or 6 years ago that they put 8 inches of foam on the flat roofs there. People have prejudices too. They say flat roofs, that's not New England. What about all the snow? Well, the snow piles up, it's well engineered, and it creates even more insulation. So, and also these buildings were the 1940s version of solar homes. We have a lot of famous examples in the area, the Dover home, for instance.
Ross, do you have comments on the zoning framework itself?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, in a lot of information is presented. There are facts which can be, I think, need to be looked at. The density numbers, for instance, we're already standing, if you eliminate the water part that isn't going to be built on, and you look up Linden 1 and Linden 2, it's 20 and 23 units per acre. Other places, it's, if you include a lot of other land that's not buildable, it's going to be a much lower number. So 20, 23 units per acre, that's pretty good, you know. I mean, so. But in order to address the information, the facts, how they're arranged and handled, and the interpretations that we draw from the facts, I think we should develop an information clearinghouse of some sort. It's not a new idea. I don't know how it would be done, but we do have an IT department. We have a Needham online news. We have new online news sources. And as I said once before, you know, well, I won't say it again. At any rate, a lot of information should be available through and such an information clearinghouse, such as Bob's zoning study, the property condition reports that Reggie's speaking to. It's like we're putting the cart before the horse. We decide the building needs work and then do the property condition reports to find out that it needs work. So it's always needed work.
Ross, I'd
Okay,
like to
I'll wait for the
focus on
second round
zoning. What's
if there
that?
is one. I'll wait for the second round.
Do you have comments about the zoning itself?
Well, the density relates to the zoning.
Yes.
Generally, I think you don't need to do the zoning. We already have a clear path forward in terms of zoning. That's no change in the zoning. We can do maintenance. We can keep the cluster housing, which I think is worth keeping, and especially with the costs and all the complexities involved. And the brick units should be retrofitted, in my belief, especially hearing from the passive house consultant who spoke at the recent meeting of, what was it? Well, whatever it was, yeah. At any rate, that fellow said, identified that style of brick building. They're all over the place. A lot of community housing, subsidized housing was done in that form. I lived on Mission Hill and saw the Bromley Heath buildings be redeveloped. Bunker Hill is going to be an example of a passive house retrofit. It's going to be outstanding.
Thank you, Ross.
So, all right.
Alex, do we have anyone else?
Kalpana, hopefully this time it's not about audio.
Okay, so Kalpana will bring you over and hopefully you can still hear us. We'll come to this side of the room next. You want to prepare your arm.
Good evening again.
Good evening.
I'm Kalpana Shah at Linden Street. I have a request, I think, because I'm confused with the people's comment that I myself also not actually understanding the zoning amendment. So would it be helpful for this meeting, a brief explanation, and then it would be the proper hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Kalpana. I'd like to continue to go through some additional public comment. We saw that there are some additional hands. We will have the zoning. It's already online through the Needham Housing Authority's site and also through the planning board. We have our own website for this as well. And the zoning is contained online. And if there's time at the end and you have a specific question about the zoning, you know, maybe we could do a very quick overview again, but I really want to continue to focus on other comments in the room because we addressed that.
So the traffic on a Linden Street in the morning, like 12-wheelers and 16-wheelers, how would it be managed while the redevelopment is in process? As well as about the children. 90% of children playing in the playground from morning to dawn, as well as they are walking, they are bicycling, because being in a 6th standard, parents think that they are now capable to take care of themselves. So while the construction is going on, or the big vehicles will be passing by, how the school buses and the disabled adults are going for the work, they are picked up and drop off, how it would be managed. The safety of the children as well as the elderly who are still working.
Thank you, Kalpana. The project itself at a later stage in the process, if the zoning is approved at town meeting, will include a traffic study. And that traffic study will study the existing conditions, and it will also study the future conditions. Professional engineers specialize in this particular body of work, and then that'll be a discussion point for the planning board, and also we may engage a separate peer review traffic engineer if we believe that that's required. And either way, we will ensure that the project minimizes the traffic impact to a reasonable standard. And certainly safety is a priority for everybody, including pedestrians that live in the area, that play in the area. And that will also be factored into the site plan and the circulation plan and the traffic impact analysis.
And if I may just jump in, because you might not know this, because it hasn't come well for the planning board, but we have actually completed a traffic study, and we measured the traffic at the rush hour periods when there's drop off and pickup. And there's a whole report already that will be updated, of course, but made available to the planning board and your consultants if you choose to bring them in.
Thank you, Rich. There were hands up on this side of the room. There was the lady in blue. Thank you for coming to the mic. And if you could say your name and address, please, for the record, that'd be helpful.
Hi, Danielle Rodriguez, 160 Maple Street. Thank you for doing this. I'll promise I'll be quick. I just want to echo some of the comments and the concerns around water management, the flooding. I haven't heard anything about how it will impact. You're saying there's studies that are coming later around that, but I do think it should be tied to the zoning. Like this is like wetlands. I don't even know if they should have constructed there in the first place. I'm all for affordable housing. I don't want anyone to think that that's not where I stand, but have we considered alternative sites? Just anything we can do to like mitigate the impact of flooding. I think I speak for many of my Maple Street neighbors. We're really concerned about that. It wasn't just the August storm. There's been other storms as well. I don't want them to think it was just once in 100 years. I think it's going to happen a lot more than that. So just want to make sure that the board takes that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And for the record, a previous speaker presented us with photographic evidence of flooding on the street. And that's helpful. We appreciate that, which was not from the August storm. And thank you for raising that comment. I see there are more hands up. Lionel will come to you in a minute, but is there anyone online? Yeah, Alex?
I'm just trying Rachel again. She declined earlier, but just in case I make a mistake, I don't want to never come back to her.
Okay. Rachel, we're trying to come to you if you can hear us. We're trying to give you an opportunity to speak. It seemed like previously technical difficulties stymied us. She's declined. Okay, all right. Okay. Appreciate everyone's patience with us. I see some more hands are up. I saw Lionel's hand was up before, so I'll come to Lionel and then I'll go online and then I'll come to you and then to Mary Ann. So we do have an order. I do see your hands up. Is Jean with us? Okay. I'll come to Joni in a second. I know that Lionel also had his hand up as well. So Lionel, do you want to speak? I will recognize you shortly now. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Lionel DeRozier, 117 Linden Street. Been in Needham since 2012, so 11 years, not as, I guess, old resident as some folks here, but not exactly a new one anymore. First, thanks for having the meeting. Thanks for letting us all speak. I think 11 years ago when I moved to town that the housing actually needed an upgrade. So I will agree. I think a lot of people agree that we do need some upgrades and something needs to be done. Again, it's just about finding the right solution for everyone. It's not going to cause further impact as well. There's been a lot of comments about the flooding. First, a quick zoning question, since I know you're hammering on that. Is this zoning question or the zoning meeting that we're talking about, is this also tying in to that MBTA communities law? Because that wasn't brought up, but that was part of it.
So we're talking tonight about zoning for Linden Chambers redevelopment. That would have its own path for zoning separately. So and if it passes, I would intend to have it pass in May of next year, 2024. Meanwhile, the zoning is still being considered and contemplated. It's not at the current stage like we're dealing with this for the MBTA compliance. That's gonna go through next year and will be presented at the October 2024. Between now and then, there may be an opportunity to capture and to be able to include some of the features of this as part of the compliance model for the MBTA bylaw will ultimately adopt. But right now, presently, it's two separate things on separate tracks.
Okay, so one zoning issue with the chart you got up before, or just one question, not issue, was that the proposed was saying you can cover 20% of the lot. So just for some clarity, a question was about, is that just the structure itself, or does that include parking lot and everything? Does that include the 20%?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's the impervious space.
So the other 80% would essentially be green space.
Effectively, yes.
Okay. Other comments. So again, I guess this is now putting the cart before the horse, but the zoning is the zoning. I know previous meeting I was at, Reg was mentioning like this project is to continue to add more deeply affordable housing for elderly and disabled folks like in the Linden Chambers development now. The MBTA communities law was talking about no age restrictions whatsoever. So I wanted to, I guess, get some clarification if when we become in compliance with that law, are they going to go back on that and not have the housing only for elderly and disabled?
So one of the questions that's before the planning board that's been raised by the housing authority through their council is whether or not to remove the existing deed restrictions that limit the residency to disabled and to seniors. And that's a question that's unresolved at this time. The town is looking into that, and there are ways to allow a certain base zoning for compliance for MBTA, without restrictions, and all of this has to be taken into consideration as part of the compliance models that the Hone track is presently working on. One of the chairs of the Hone committee is Natasha. Do you Is there anything else you wish to add to that?
I think, yeah, sure. I think some of the questions that we've been asking in the meetings, and we have community meetings for Hone, so I'd encourage you to come to those meetings, is understanding, and Jean is also part of the committee, is understanding how we can create the contiguous pieces of land near the MBTA stations. In this case, we were looking at the zoning separately. Am I right on this, Jean? We were looking at the zoning for this parcel separately as to not be part of the contiguous at this moment. But again, we need to leave it open to see what our consultant is reviewing, because what happens is that we looked at it when we did the master plan, the housing master plan, we looked at it globally, but they have specific programs that they use to understand how each station will work. And so that's why we don't have a definitive answer at this moment. But I think that the idea is that this would remain as a separate zone, a separate zoning at the moment, so that it can accommodate the senior and the disabled housing.
I do want to
Is that
correct
accurate?
something. I was wrong before. You asked a question about lot coverage, and you asked if that, and I incorrectly said, I was wrong when I said that lot coverage includes all the impervious space. The lot coverage relates to the building only, not to the parking lots and so on. I apologize for, I can't get it right every time.
It's a big difference, though.
Yes.
And now, I guess
Just
the
a
other,
moment,
other.
If I could just ask you, Lionel, just to complete your comment, are you in favor of having elderly restriction, or would you favor having it just be open and no restriction, or you don't have an opinion?
I mean, I think for this particular project, I mean, I think you said the waiting list was pretty long to get into the housing as is. So I wouldn't see a reason to open or loosen the restrictions, because there are a lot of folks that really need that housing now that are trying to get into that housing and that can't. So why would we need to open it even further and make it harder for those folks to get in?
Well, a hypothetical would be when all us baby boomers die out, then maybe the demographics will be different in the future.
Well, people are living longer, so there'll probably be a lot more people needing
And
that
it could
elderly
go that way
and
as
disabled
well.
housing, because the older we get, the more disabled we tend to get, right? Or harder to move around. But and the last part, just more of a comment. This will be Adam's favorite, to be a little repetitive. Nancy, your yard is beautiful. I actually walked by her yard, and it is really beautiful. And I also walked by her yard. I could see it when we had the flooding. Since moving to town, I mean, with our house alone, we've spent thousands of dollars on drainage systems, sump pumps, sloping our driveway differently. But still, that wasn't enough. And one thing that we talked about, I know, Adam, you and I had a conversation about, Reg talked about at a meeting, was with the drainage. You said, well, this project will handle the water, its own water. It's going to maintain its own water. And I said, well, for this amount of money to be spent, we should be fixing the existing problem in addition to just saying, oh, well, we're going to maintain the status quo, so you're still going to flood, no problem. But we're just not going to make you flood more. So you're going to get, a foot of water instead of 5 feet of water. So I feel like that's something that really needs to be addressed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I dug, and there was a woman in front of you who had her hand up beforehand, which I will recognize you. Is there someone else online? Joni Shockett, thanks for being patient. You could say your name and address for the record. That'd be helpful, please. Thank you.
Hi, Lionel asked my first question, which was about the MBTA overlay. My second question is, with all the rezoning that's gone on, and I've lived in Needham since 1978. So I've seen lots and lots of rezoning. Do these rezonings apply only to the one property that's in consideration?
Yes, we're looking at this zoning would create a new district in the area called the Affordable Housing District. There's a separate map article that will be presented to town meeting, which would show the boundaries of this site. And for the record, because community housing, as Ross put it earlier this evening, is regarded as a public aim, as a public benefit to support our community. even though we are zoning perhaps one parcel, it's not considered spot zoning.
Okay, that was my question. Is this spot zoning? And then the other part of it is, does this set precedent for other projects to come and say, you did it for them, now do it for us?
So that's a very important question, and I appreciate you asking it. This is a very unique situation. We're talking about supporting community housing.
Right, which
we
I
know
completely,
that-
by the way, which I completely support, and I'm thrilled to hear that this is for elderly, as Massachusetts is aging and people have no place to live. So thank you for that. Go ahead, I'm sorry I interrupted.
I would say that, again, because of the public aim of the project and the zoning, we're not looking at this on a precedent-setting basis. The parameters for private development that support other kinds of affordable housing are very different than this deeply affordable housing area. So no, we don't regard it as a
Okay.
precedent-setting basis.
That was about all kinds of zoning, you know, in the town, like especially the stuff that's going on in the Heights with so much building. But I think that these kinds of things, these rezoning for an individual project like this, especially for community housing, and to expand it to afford some relief for so many people is a wonderful thing. And I know that it will upset some people, because everything that's done ever upsets some people. And as someone else said, it's for the good of everyone. And I hope that however this is built, they are sensitive to the neighbors and they build accordingly. And please keep the trees.
Thank you, Joni.
Mhm.
And do you have anything else?
No, I know somebody who lives there. I know how much it needs to be fixed and repaired and replaced. And I will be happy to see these people living in dignity and in fresh and clean, updated, upgraded environment. I think it's wonderful.
Thank you very much. Marianne, I'll come to you shortly. There was another hand up before on this side of the room. If you could please state your name and address for the record, that would be helpful.
Before I state my name and address, I'm just curious, the name and address of the person who just spoke.
Oh, Joni Shockett, is Joni still here? She lives in the Heights. I can't remember if she stated her address.
Okay. Well, my name is Cynthia Contori. I live on Robinwood Ave 96. And Robinwood Ave is just an extension, say, of Linden Street if you cross High Rock. And I've been a town meeting member, not anymore, but I was for many years. I've lived here since 1982. And I just wanted to talk about the history of that area. That area, they built the school for this low-income housing, the veterans housing after the Korean War, so that those children could walk safely to school. And then they built the housing for the elderly right across the street. And they had them facing the playground so that they could see the children playing. And they put in amazing trees. I read articles from the old newspapers. It was almost like an arboretum. And since then, they've cut down quite a lot of those, even though at town meeting, I said, please don't cut down these specimen trees, but they did. And High Rock was a wonderful school. My daughter got to go there for 2 years, but then they closed it. And when they closed it, a lot of us said, hey, you know, this school is working. It was one of the best schools And it actually had the best fourth grade testing in the state, which was really remarkable because they had students who were in low income housing and they also had Metco. So it was like an amazing school. And they decided to put everyone into a middle school, Newman, on Central Avenue. And a lot of us were concerned about kids, especially in that region, walking across Central Ave. So they put me on the town moderator put me on the school safety study committee, and I worked really hard to keep busing because they were going to discontinue that. And I worked hard for those students that were living in low income housing in the town not to have to pay for busing, because they decided to make us have to pay for busing. But I worked really hard on that committee so that they wouldn't have to pay. And we warned the town, we're really worried about the students who were given a school. The school was built for them. To have that taken away from them and have to go to a school that is not safe for them to walk. And a child got hit by a car and very, very badly injured. And I never heard of it. I heard of it because someone called me and said, why isn't this in the police log? And it turned out they just didn't put it in the police log. And boy, I got into a lot of trouble because I brought it up. Why isn't this in the police log? And so since then, they rented the school. Turns out one of the reasons they said they needed to rent out the school was to make money, to keep programs. And it turned out they didn't charge enough rent to cover the operating costs.
Cynthia, do you have comments about the zoning?
Oh, yes, I
itself?
do.
Great.
I'm trying to give you a history. I think it's important when you rezone an area to know the history of that area.
Thank you.
Sorry. So what did they do? They rented it and they didn't get enough rent. They weren't paying enough rent to cover the operating costs. So they discontinued that the rental when that got found out, because we weren't told that. We were told we were going to make surplus money. So then they made it into a 6th grade so that there are buses coming in there all the time. And it's changed the entire, so they ignored the safety of those children living in that neighborhood already once to the detriment of a child. And then they started putting all these buses in. It's a 6th grade for the whole town instead of making it back into an elementary school for those children. They're still deprived of their K through 6 school. The town has just said, oh, that area, who cares if there's buses going through there all the time? Who cares if this woman, can't hardly get out of her driveway? Who cares about that region? We're just gonna do this. And boy, when I've gotten up at town meeting, when they say that they don't have enough room, and I said, well, why don't we open High Rock? One of the selectmen, got really mad at me for saying that. So I feel like this area is very politically charged in this town. And they like to spot redistrict in our town, in our area. They like to just ignore the needs of the people who live in that region. And again, they're ignoring the needs of the people who live in that region by putting a 4-story city-like building in a neighborhood roads that cannot accommodate that. They can barely accommodate the buses that they've inflicted on that area. And it's 4 stories. It looks like it's going to look like a city. And that's the residential residential zoning. And that's just being, oh, who cares? And so what if there's 100 more people living there? Who cares about the children who live in the veterans housing, who play in those streets, who ride their bikes in those streets? Who cares? And who cares what I say? Even though I was unfortunately right before. Do we want to see a child run over? I mean, that kind of a building, normally people will put a building 4 stories on a main road. They don't go into a residential area and say, okay, let's plunk down a building that's 4 stories or 5 or 6 stories, because they know this is a residential area. This is zoned to be a residential area. And they don't do that, but they're going to do it here. And I bet you they're going to do it. And I will be back if one child gets hurt. And I'm never going to let this town forget about that boy who walked out of Newman and was hit by a car, and that the town actually hid it from us by telling the police not to put it in the police log. It wasn't in the fire log. It won't be hidden if I find out about it. And I think that this should not be spot redistricted. It is spot redistricted. You can say it isn't, but it is.
Thank you very much. Alex, is there anyone online?
Janice, actually, none of the commissioners or board members, were asking questions, but do you have something else other that's just a question or a comment?
I have my hand up.
Yeah, I'm just saying that this is for public comment here, and you're a commissioner, so
Well, I'm the resident commissioner, so
a resident commissioner too, that's right. So you have your hand up as a resident.
yes,
You are Commissioner, yes.
yes.
But all the planning board members are also residents as well? Of Needham?
Let's,
So I can't speak what,
Well,
I
I'll
can't
leave it
say
up
what
to
I,
Adam, who's moderating here.
yeah, let's.
Go ahead,
continue.
Janice.
Thank you.
oh, thank you for letting me speak. Because I just want to address one thing that nobody's really brought up on the drainage problem. Because it seems that, if the town may want to, help intervene with that, because we are the town of Needham, those rain barrels that collect rainwater, and they can be used for the community gardens or the raised gardens that the people love over at Linden and Chambers. Has anybody thought about that as a little bit of
Thank you, Janice. That's it. The landscaping plan is something that's project specific at a later date. When we go through an approval process for a particular project, we're focused now on the overall zoning framework, but we're going to note your comment so that as they develop a landscape plan, that they're mindful of the comments that you've just raised. Do you have any comments relating to the zoning framework itself?
no, I don't. I'm sorry. But
Okay.
I was just, trying to back up the residents with, the drainage process. So, because if we don't have the surrounding town approval, it might not go our way as the Needham Housing Authority would like it. So, I'm just trying to appease everybody with that resolution. So, that solution.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
A lot of hands just came up. I'm still keeping a mindful order of speakers. Marianne had her hand up before you did, Doug, and I see there are a couple people here and here. I promise we will get to you. Appreciate your patience, Marianne.
High Street. I'm here just speaking totally for myself, so I need to be clear about that. I was very pleased to see option B this evening, which does move a portion of the building forward and put some parking behind. I think nothing screams development like a parking lot in front of a building. And so I really appreciate the ability to soften that some with bringing the building closer. I do not have an issue with the height of the building. I think I'm fine with all the zoning. And personally, my opinion is I would be for taking the restrictions off and for letting the housing authority manage the backlog within the conditions that are required for people who have access and who need access to deeply affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Alex, is there anyone else online that with their hands up? Did we have her speak before?
We tried her. She didn't.
Okay, Jean, we're going to come back to you and hopefully we'll be able to connect with you this time.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my comments. My name is Jean Strasburger. I live at 175 Maple Street. And I am concerned, as my neighbors are, about unforeseen flooding issues. But I'm calling mostly to ask about the increase in occupancy. So I guess that'd be a density issue. And how that would be managed in terms of folks cutting through the residents on Maple Street, cutting through from Linden Street to get to the supermarket or wherever. I currently have a steady stream of people coming through my property, which is already problematic and has always been since I moved to Needham. And I am concerned if we increase the occupancy quite a bit, it would be unmanageable for me. I know I have a well-worn path that comes straight through my yard, and I believe there's 2 or 3 other points along Maple Street that are used as cut-throughs. So I'm just interested to see if there's any thought given to managing that kind of foot traffic. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment, Jean.
Thank you.
I saw your hand up. I will recognize you, Doug. You could.
Okay.
Doug Fox, 43 Mark Tree Road. I attended High Rock School, born and raised on Mark Tree. My best friend who lived across the street from me, his grandmother lived in this complex, had fond memories going there and eating lunch with her. Like, it was really a great complex. My mother-in-law lived in 170D for 2 years. It was amazing. My wife and my kids could scooter over there all the time, spend time with her. I fully support this. The idea of adding 95 additional units that people can move into. We have a loneliness epidemic, especially with seniors. For seniors to be able to live in our town where their families are, 95 additional ones, that's a great bonus, both for them and for the residents. So I fully support it. This is not a question about zoning, but just probably cost is why you can't do it. But I would love if there was a way to do balconies on these, where all these individuals right now can step outside their front door and get fresh air. I've seen public housing with balconies. I know it can be done. If there's a way to do that, that would be a nice thing to add. But I fully support the zoning and the complex. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Alex, is there anyone? All right. Emily Cooper, if you could state your name and address for the record, that would be helpful. And then, sorry, we'll come to you.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you great.
Great, thank you. And thanks everybody for this hard work. I want to say that I support the zoning
Can you state
changes.
your address? I'm sorry. to
Oh, I'm
interrupt,
so
Emily.
sorry. No, of course. Emily Cooper, and I live at 56 Lee Road in Needham, behind what used to be Muzzy Fork. So I am a member, or was a member, of the Housing Planning Working Group that met all last year and put together the plan that was referenced earlier by Reg and other folks. And what we heard time and time again was that there wasn't enough housing, particularly for older adults. We also heard about it from parents of grown children who are disabled and can't afford to live in Needham. And so this was a recurring theme. Everybody mentioned it at all stages of the planning group and at all income levels. We also, I also actually have been in the Housing Authority buildings, and we've heard from Housing Authority residents that it's not so great. One of my favorite experiences, not favorite, I shouldn't say that. One of my experiences was that when I went to visit one day, there was just a whole mess of walkers and wheelchairs and transport chairs at the bottom of the stairs. And I asked somebody about it. They said, well, the people on the second floor, you know, they kind of stagger their way to the stairs and then come down on their tushies, and then they can get to their walker or their wheelchair or their transport chair, because that's how inaccessible the housing is. So I think we owe it to the current residents who have been living there to make it better. I think that this plan, it's easy for me to say I support something and I don't live next to it. But I do think it is trying to balance a variety of things. The need for more housing, what can be built on that space, including the wetlands, the ability to keep a neighborhood feel. What I heard, which we haven't brought up, is I heard setbacks, I heard walking paths, I heard green space, I heard community gardens, and I heard from the architect a real attempt to make this not feel like it's a skyscraper in the middle of a small town. And those things, you know, will only benefit, you know, when you're starting fresh is when you get to say, oh, well, this path is so beautiful if we do it this way or we do it that way. So I just want to say I really support this. It's a great balance of trying to meet a variety of people's needs, including the community and the neighbors and the residents. And it's a really good compromise, and it moves us really far along a way into addressing needs that people have communicated.
Thank you. There's still some other people that haven't had a chance yet to speak. I recognize the gentleman in the blue shirt, blue sweater.
Hi there, my name is Morris Singer. My family and I live at 60 Sylvan Road. In terms of the Linden Street side of things, my family's home is one of the closest homes to the development, save for maybe Nancy's and a few others. Indeed, it's the closest home on the south side. And I just want to say my wife and I and our family moved to Needham in June of 2021. We love it here. We love the neighborhood. We totally support having affordable housing in our neighborhood and the redevelopment of Linden Chambers. I do have some concerns about the development as it's currently planned. And I just want to go through some of that, particularly around how it may change the character of the neighborhood. For me, the easiest place to start is around density. So this plan contemplates transitioning from 152 units to 247 units. That's a 163% increase in density at Linden Chambers, 163%. Presently, the entire housing stock of NHA is 336 units. And NHA is looking at Linden Chambers as a way of increasing their housing stock by 128%. 128% increase all at that site. There's no other alternative looked at for that 128% increase. 95 units. One can't simply add 95 units in density to a lot that has only 900 feet of frontage along the street without transforming the neighborhood. 95 units. If you look at Maple Street, just as a comparison, there are 35 structures on Maple Street. Adding 95 units is equivalent to adding 3 streets to this neighborhood. And as I speak with my neighbors, I hear a lot of concerns about traffic and parking and the impact that density will have on that. And I just want to visualize for everyone what that means. Even at the planned 0.5 spaces per unit parking allotment, we're still expecting another 47 cars. 47 cars. And if you lined those cars up along Linden Street, they would basically cover that stretch of street in front of the property. Most of the street would be covered with cars. Second point I want to make is about height. There's been a lot of discussion about height, and I've heard a lot of comparison with High Rock. Each time it comes up, what I hear is High Rock is a high structure as well, and so we're not really changing the character of the neighborhood by creating a similarly sized building in height. Well, I'll tell you, I live across from the High Rock School. I cannot see the High Rock School from my house. The reason for that is that there's approximately 100 feet of setback from the street to the High Rock School on Sylvan Road that's covered with trees and with houses. And on Linden Street, the High Rock School is set back from Linden Street by 200 feet of athletic fields. That's why it sits in that spot. It's also built into the side of a hill. And at one end, it's basically one story, even though it's 3 stories tall. So I really don't think that the discussion comparing the High Rock School to what we're contemplating on Linden Street is an apt comparison. I just want to call that out. Building a 53-foot structure on flat ground is a totally different ballgame. And the final concern that I'll raise is on the issue of occupancy restrictions. And in its October presentation to this body, the Needham Housing Authority addressed the issue of restrictive covenants in the Linden Chambers deeds. And I recognize that that is not a direct consideration on zoning, but I still think it's relevant. It's relevant because this body is considering how it is going to pave the way for this development. And in order for this development to qualify for financing, the restrictive covenant in the deed needs to at least be modified to enable disabled persons to live in the property. Right now, the restrictive covenant says only elderly folks can live in the property. So we should just not consider removing that restriction. Removing that restriction as a blanket removal by consent of the town would not be an advisable way to proceed, in my opinion. And I would just like to see the planning board press the housing authority for a stronger statement about how it plans to build and fund this property without per se absolving itself of the binding restriction in the Linden Chambers deed. So I'll conclude. I hear a lot of talk from Reg and from NHA that this building can't be done unless it is built exactly to these specifications and in this way with this number of units. And I'll tell you that for me personally, I work in technology. I hear this kind of reasoning all the time. The project can't be done unless it meets these very specific constraints. And usually what happens is that I discover that imposing frugality along one or more constraints actually yields a better result and a more optimal result. And I would challenge the housing authority in the zoning to do this in a manner that's more frugal on height, on density, on cost, or on other dimensions. And I know that that certainly won't make this easier for the Needham Housing Authority to get the job done. But I do think that only then will we really understand what the best outcome is for this site and for the people who live in this community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Morris. Alex, is there anyone? We have Beth. How many hands do we have up online? Beth is the last one. Okay. So we'll bring Beth over and Beth, if you're able to state your name and address for the record.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can. We'd like to see you
Okay.
if you could turn your camera on.
Let's see.
That's wonderful.
Okay.
Very good.
All
Thank you.
right. My name's Beth Bandis. I live at 158 Mark Tree Road. I've been here about 24 years. And I walk all over the neighborhood, including quite frequently on Linden Street. From what I can see from the outside, it looks to me very much like these buildings need to be redone. And I just want to echo what a few people have said about the common good and the dire need for housing. And we have to think about the people who need housing. And to me, I just for the record, I think the design looks very nice and seems like will offer more dignity. And I like, the idea of the increased green space. I like what Mary Ann said about parking, maybe some in the back. So it's not all parking in the front. But it seems to me a lot of thought's been put into this and I support it. That's all.
Thank you, Beth.
Yeah.
Jim?
Thanks to the planning board and NHA and town leadership for convening this meeting. My name is Jim Flanagan. I live at 863 Webster Street, and I'm a town meeting member in Precinct G. I'm also a member of the Needham Housing Coalition. I'm speaking in support of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. I'll keep it brief as it's getting late. I did want to touch on some of the financing, and I know it's difficult to understand. I've done private and public sector financing and management. Private sector things are much more linear, right? And if you shrink something, then you can shrink costs. Unpacking this over time, as I've been looking at this for the past several years, that doesn't work in the public sector. Often there are offsets and constraints. So I want to highlight something, and again, commend the NHA for bringing in the Cambridge Housing Authority and partnering that helps to unpack this financing. It's a layer cake. The fact that, you know, we can get a tenfold return on a $7 million investment by the town is just amazing to me. And then that unpacks and is connected to financing of the modernization of Seabed's Cook and potentially opening up other funding for High Rock homes and so on and so forth. So I encourage folks to, you know, go to some T-Chalk meetings where they unpack that financing more, because it's not straightforward. It takes some time. And I'm following that too, but just shrinking one element can cause the whole thing to collapse is something I want to reinforce. Finally, I just want to say that with any change comes fear. My fear is that we delay this and miss key state and federal approval deadlines, many of which are competitive. My fear is that when I drive down Linden in 2027, there is no change other than further deterioration and greater deferred maintenance and increased costs. My fear is that the waiting list grows. My fear is that the same is true in 2037 and 2047, as we've recognized this problem for the last 30 or 40 years. And finally, my fear is that the needed changes and improvements at Seabed's Cook, Chambers, High Rock, so on and so forth, remain dormant because we couldn't get moving on this. So thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Alex, is anyone- Okay. So at this point, there's no one else online that wishes to speak. Is there anyone else in the room that hasn't spoken yet? I see Oscar. Is there anyone else that wanted to speak? So I'll recognize Oscar and then I'll recognize you. We'll check one more time online and then we'll start to wrap it up, I think.
Good evening. It's Oscar Mertz from Ryberry Hillway, 67 Ryberry Hillway. I do not want to speak long, but I am here in support of this project. I've been closely paying attention to the efforts that have gone on with the design of this project and seeing how there's a lot of desire to find that sort of balancing point between what's the right solution for being able to make this a feasible, financially feasible project, and how can it be a good neighbor to the smaller scale buildings around them. I'm grateful for all the passion that I've heard tonight from all of the neighbors. The history about High Rock School actually is remarkable. And it actually, I'd just like to pass on a vision. I think that the one thing I would love to see is that this High Rock neighborhood remains for the people who have lived here in this affordable housing community. And I'd also love to see the High Rock School come back as an elementary school for kids to walk to, so that we don't have to have busing to a middle school. That certainly was the thing that just blew up everything, I think, for the neighborhood to experience that kind of traffic. I don't think We've heard a lot of things tonight that seem like technical issues that could not be solved. I think the flooding is something that is going to be clearly in the gun sights for everybody to solve. And I know that there's a lot of benefit from being able to consolidate to a single footprint and then be able to manage all that other open space to handle the water. I think that the ability to set the building back, I'm kind of in a, I don't know if I'm happy about moving it forward and putting parking behind, or if I like it set back because it feels like it's the right way to set back from that open space for the neighborhood. But I do think a lot of work has gone into this. I think there's tremendous amount of need for this community and the need for it to grow and be able to meet the long waiting list for people who need this affordable housing. So thank you, everyone, for all the hard work.
Thank you, Oscar. Alex, is there anyone else? We do have someone online, Georgina. Okay, once we hear from Georgina, and then we'll hear from the woman in the front, Helen. I'm sorry, a lot of names tonight, and then I think at that point we'll cut it off if that's reasonable to everyone. Go ahead, Alex. We'll bring over Georgina.
Hello, good evening. My name is Georgina Arietta Rutnick. I live at 236 Greendale Avenue in Needham, and I am a town meeting member of Precinct J. I just want to thank the NHA and the Planning Board for having this forum to inform our community about what is going on. And since I don't live in the neighborhood, I don't want to speak about the possible impact in the area because I don't live there specifically. However, I do feel strongly that the housing issue is important. So if this is the most prudent way to address the housing issue, then I rise in favor of it. And the only other aspect of it that I would like to really put into consideration is that since it is in the town center area, that the commuting aspect, whether, access to the commuter rail or the bus in town center, if that could be incorporated into some plan, that would be appreciated as well. Thank you all so much. And thank you to all the previous speakers as well. It was all very educational, and particularly to this regarding the history of the area and the High Rock School. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Georgina. Helen, if you'd like to wrap it up.
My name is Helen, again, Begiragosian. In my 10 years as resident of Chambers, I want you to know that a lot of the elderly people I'm seeing, unfortunately, we all got to go at some point and they pass on. And so the cars, don't be afraid too much about cars, because I can tell you right now, there's about 3 or 4 people that are no longer using their cars. In fact, they were towed away, some of them. So that not everybody drives all the way through their senior years. They stop driving at a certain point. That's one. The other one is that I founded a raised garden club there and partnered with the Rotary Club and Needham PD and housing. We now have galvanized steel beds with stainless steel bolts that can be moved. So that addresses the seniors' insecurity for food and also gives them a therapeutic, hobby or so, to go out and therapize with the soil and so forth. And we respect the water ordinances. I teach them to, in all languages, to respect the water ordinances, not wastewater. And the only other thing I want to say is, I think Reg had mentioned once that we're not going to be having bathtubs. So someone mentioned bathtubs of water getting emptied. We're just going to have walk-in showers. And that's all they're going to have there, not tubfuls of water. Unfortunately, it's a valley under a hill, as everybody knows. But please, we want to keep our community a community. That's a community there of people that all know one another. And the worst thing to do with a community like they've done in other housings is to break them up, send them scattered, and they're no longer a community together. That further perpetuates the isolation thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you very much. We've heard a lot of comments tonight. I myself have 6 pages. I know Jean takes even more meticulous notes. We've heard a variety of comments, a number of comments have related to project specific items. A number of comments have related to the zoning, the specific zoning. You've raised some questions, some hard questions that as a planning board, we need to ask, and that we need to ask of the Needham Housing Authority. The process is going to continue. I would like to assure everyone that has spoken tonight, we in no way are minimizing, the history or the significance of public safety. We implement a mindful process to be mindful of public safety, to be mindful of the impacts on infrastructure, to be mindful of the impacts of neighbors that live in the immediate area. I'm not far away. I'm on High Rock and Chestnut. We'll ride our, my 11-year-old will ride his bike on Sylvan Linden, up Oak and so on. We walk our puppy, not quite a puppy anymore, across the street. So we're all neighbors here. We take these comments seriously. It will impact the questions that we ask during the process and over the course of the next several months. In January and in February, there'll be additional opportunities for your participation. It's helpful. We'd like to hear from your neighbors as well. Anyone is able to email us at Needham MA, the email address is planning@needhamma.gov. That's planning@needhamma.gov. And I think with that,
If I might just jump in and
Please,
say
Reg.
Thank you from the Housing Authority as well. Great turnout, great questions. I speak for the Housing Authority, but I suspect for the planning board when we say we want to do this on a completely transparent basis. And so we'll get all those questions answered. I'm sure there'll be lots of more questions. Our email address would sound like we're running for office or something here. You can either send it directly to me at chair@needhamhousing.org, and I think, or you can post it on our website, which is lindenchambers-needham.com. And I second what Adam says. Will you please go tell all your friends and neighbors who couldn't make it tonight about this meeting? They haven't missed it. It will, in a day or 2 or 3, it'll be on the Town of Needham YouTube channel. It'll also, I think you'll be able to click it on our Needham, the Needham channel site. You can probably find it there as well, and they can watch it. And we'll make sure that these email addresses for comments are available when we post the YouTube video, and people who missed making comment, please send it in. We want to hear from you. So thank you again. And I think it's time to say goodnight.
Thank you again. Thank you to the Needham channel for sending staff and support. We apologize for the technical snafu in the beginning. And with that, can I have a motion to adjourn from the planning board? So I have a motion and a second. Wait, any discussion on the motion on either board? Hearing none. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you all very much for coming tonight.